Imagine if you could learn from somebody that coaches over 800 millionaires and multimillionaires. Imagine if you could learn from someone that went on his own journey, starting as the support, the help to an event, and became the CEO of that premier mastermind. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the unique privilege and honor to learn today from Matt King, the CEO of one of the most prestigious real estate and investing and just community-based organizations called GoBundance. They are the tribe for healthy, wealthy, and generous men who choose to lead epic lives. And this man comes on, and I'm so honored to have him on for him to share his knowledge about what he sees. You know, someone that has that kind of influence has a tremendous amount of perspective on what makes people successful, what makes people fail. He's got a tremendous amount of data and perspective and all these different perspectives coming in from, coming into him on what the economy is going to do, where it's headed, what the signs are out there. And so we dive into what's the economy going to look like? What does co-living look like? What's the future of that going to look like? And what are common causes of failure? What are common causes of success? And he unlocks what he believes is the Trojan horse to knowledge. I enjoy this episode tremendously, and I hope you do too. Well, hey, dude, let's dive in. Super grateful for the time just to chat with you and kind of pick your brain. I feel like I've had a really cool seat to your growth, to your transformation, and I want to dive into that and just a little bit about your story and have a really cool story to tell around that. Actually, I'd like to start there. Actually, I feel like when I first met you, Matt, for lack of a better term, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way at all, but like you were, if I remember correctly, you were helping with the event, right? Like
Correct.
You were Go Crew at an event.
Yeah, and that's right.
And so here we are a few years later. You're the CEO of an 800 plus millionaire mastermind. Most of the people in the group, multimillionaires. You oversee a family office, and and you yourself are a multimillionaire. And so, dude, what's your superpower? What's your secret to this advancement that I've seen you do over the last few years? And what advice would you have for somebody that's literally trying to accomplish the same thing, which is most of my audience, right? We're trying to become financially free. We want to accomplish big dreams and goals. And you're walking the path, but you've walked a huge piece of it already, which is really, really, really inspiring.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I'm honored that you would mention that and bring that up. I remember looking up to you back in the day and still do look up to you. I remember you would sit in Tahoe by the fireplace, sitting cross-legged, journaling at 9 at night. And then at 4 in the morning, you're still there doing it. I'm like, man, what the heck is going on with this guy? Like, he's into it. He's dialed in. To answer your question, for me, I think my superpower is service. And I keep saying this, and one person actually called me out and saying it was a bad perspective. So I'll be curious to hear your thought. But, I have this belief, Sam, that service is the Trojan horse to knowledge. So if you want to learn anything in the world, just serve the people who do it already, and they'll tell you everything they know. Now, the person said, well, like a Trojan horse can be seen as bad. I was like, well, yeah, if the Trojan horse comes into your castle, it's terrible. But if you're the group trying to attack the castle, the Trojan horse was the thing, right? That's how you got in. So for me, like, I just always try to serve. And what happens when you serve is, people will reward you in amazing ways. The world will reward you in amazing ways. God, the universe, whatever you believe in, it just shows up in beautiful ways. And so, what started off as service for the GoBundance members in the back of the room 10 years ago, volunteering and making sure people had water in their cup, has transpired and given me the opportunity to be in rooms where people had to have certain qualifications and pay thousands of dollars to be there. I was there for free. Now I wasn't getting paid, but like, honestly, everything I learned, Sam, I should have been paying to be in there, right? Like, it's incredible. Everything that I've learned, everything I've acquired from a knowledge perspective. And the number one way I do that is I just try to serve. So, whether it's with you, whether it's with David, whether it's with Pat, Tim, doesn't matter. How can I serve you? How can I help? I just got off the phone with the owner of the Cincinnati Reds. Like, how did I get into that relationship? Like, I just provided service. I just showed up and said, how can I be of service to you? How can I help you? And I don't get in people's face and go like, how can I help? How can I help? But what I do, Sam, is I step back. I look at what people are doing. I listen to what people are saying, and I say, how can I be of service to them? Whether it's just picking up their backpack and handing it to them, or making sure they had water, or, just pausing and saying, hey, I remember you mentioned your wife was sick. How's she doing? it's just being super intentional with people. And I think, what I always try to do is be a man of my word. So if I say I'm going to do something, I try to do it. Now, I say I try to do it because at the end of the day, Sam, I'm human. I think all of the listeners on this call would agree we're all human until such a time where we're robots and just machines, which you're pretty dang close to. But, until we're robots and machines, we're going to make mistakes. The only difference between a rut and a grave is how long you choose to stay there. So I lead with a servant heart. I try to avoid judgment for myself and others. And then I try to just continue to be the most humble version of myself that I can, because I know every single person I meet every single day can teach me something, whether it's the janitor at the airport or the pilot of the airplane or the person who owns the entire airport. It doesn't matter. They all have a lesson to teach me, and they all have wisdom that I can take and apply to my life to make it better.
Dude, that's amazing. And one of the things, pure gold, by the way, that's a podcast right there. Like, mic drop.
7
like,
minutes,
I'm good,
done.
dude. Thanks for being on the show. I'm reminded of a story, and I want to tell it. It's about you. And I want to tell it because I think one of the things that I hear whenever I hear someone preach service, and one of the fears, and frankly, one of my fears is, like, I'll think of a guy like David Osborne, who we both know he was on the podcast. He was the last episode, so I think you'll be the episode right after him. And a lot of my audience will know him and know what he's about. And so, it's like, well, someone that's way more successful than I am, what can I offer them? Right? Is like the first thought, or maybe call it a limiting belief or a negative belief. And we're like, well, is there really anything I can give them? But man, one of the stories that David Osborne shared, and now you're overseeing his family office, but one of the stories he shared about you that I thought was so beautiful, and I want to get your perspective on it because I actually haven't asked you about it, is he shared one of the first GoBundance events he was at, or you were at. You came up to him and said, hey, I know your wife is coming into town. Do you want me to go to your hotel room and refresh the room before she gets here? And the way he tells the story is great. He kind of like looks at you and he's like, that's a weird request. Like, no, I'm good. Yeah. Thank you. And then he goes about his day, and like an hour or two later, he thinks about it and he's like, actually, like, my wife would probably really appreciate that. And that would be really awesome. And so he comes back to you and is like, hey, is the offer still stand? Would you go to my hotel room and refresh it? And you're like, yeah, heck yeah. And you go up and you make the room look really nice. And so you served somebody, in a way that like most people wouldn't have normally thought about. That is not a common ask, man. That's even I'd say that's even like a little uncommon. Even took David Osborne by surprise a little bit. So what was going through your head in that moment? Because we're talking about service. And so I want to just kind of like get your perspective on that moment. What was going on in your head?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, like, I think sometimes we have to try to dial into awareness of our subconscious in addition to our conscious mind, which I know you're all familiar with. But for me, there was just something like intuitively, something subconsciously that was just like, man, this guy is somebody you want to be around. This guy is somebody that you want to aspire to be like. And so like what went through my mind was literally like, I walked into his room to get his ski boots. I knew Tracy was coming up that night. I was like, dude, your room is a disaster. Like, I wasn't married at the time. I had a girlfriend who's now my wife. And I was thinking to myself, like, if Melissa came here, she'd be like, dude, what happened? Like, the last thing I want to do is come on a vacation with you and be cleaning up after you. Like, I do that at home. And so I was just like, here this guy has been pouring knowledge and wisdom into all of these people at this event, 150 people for the last day and a half. I've been so privileged to be in the back of the room hearing it. And I was like, man, the least I could do is return the favor. I was just like, dude, like, let me just straighten up your room. Like, I didn't think anything of it. Like, it wasn't weird or off or anything to me. It was just like purely like, how can I serve this person in this moment? And like what's ironic or interesting about it is like, I haven't changed that perspective at all. And what's even more ironic is that David has that same perspective. And so I think what you started with is like, sometimes we have this story of like, that person has great success. So who am I to serve them? I would challenge you and anybody that has that same limiting belief that I have at times too is, Elon Musk, right? Probably one of the most brilliant business people in the world today. Probably one of the most like pioneer type guys you could think of.
For sure.
I can almost guarantee you somebody doesn't put on his underwear every day. Like, I can almost guarantee you he puts on his own socks. I can almost guarantee you he puts on his own shoes. The same way you do, the same way I do. And I can guarantee you that in his life, in his day, there are some bumps and some rocks and some issues that regardless of how big or how small, you could provide value around. Whether it's like
Wow.
hey, wrong coffee cup, or hey, coffee was too hot, or hey, you know what? Let me tie your shoe, or whatever it is, right? Like there's something you can do to serve him. There's something I could do to serve David. And I just try to continue to do that for the people I touch. And what's really cool about it, Sam, is like David is that too. So when you find people that are like that, then you can really build this really cool relationship where you can have each other's back. I mean, there's days still to this day where David will come upstairs as I'm getting ready to leave his house, because that's where I work out of primarily. And he will grab my lunch box or like my lunch bag, and he'll carry it to my car for me. I mean, it's like a 2-pound lunch bag. I got it, dude. I can carry this. But he's like, I just want to do something for you today. Like, let me just carry this to your car. I'm like, dude, like, you don't have to carry it to my car. It's fine. He's like, no, I'm carrying it to the car. And like, he'll literally do stuff like that all the time just to show like, hey, nothing is above me. Nothing is below me. Like at the end of the day, we're all here to serve each other. And, I think money is just a byproduct of that service. And so I think if you focus on the service like David has, or like I have, or like my parents taught me, the world rewards you in these incredible ways.
Wow. So well said, man. So beautiful. So you mentioned knowledge, and I want to kind of just pivot here just for a moment. You mentioned knowledge and how knowledge is. Could you repeat that quote again about the Trojan horse?
Yeah. I think service is the Trojan horse to knowledge. So if you want knowledge, the way to get it without having to ask for it is just serve. And when you provide service, people will tell you everything they know.
Yeah. You have the unique privilege. I almost see you as like a version of Napoleon Hill. Like Napoleon Hill, he wrote Think and Grow Rich, and his whole goal was just like he got to study. Like he got hired by Andrew Carnegie to just study successful people and study failures. And he walked away with, obviously a ton of knowledge. And so you're in almost a very similar situation, Matt, is what I see you in, is like you get to go in, you get to watch all these millionaires come through this mastermind called GoBundance, which I'm totally hoping this episode is just a big sales pitch for GoBundance. I've been in for the last, since 2014 myself. That's how we know each other. And you get to see people and like, what are some of the common denominators of success? And I want to even ask you about maybe some of the common denominators for failure. But the first question I want to ask you is just how important is, let's say, knowledge to achieving success in your viewpoint on this huge group of guys that are achieving success? And so it's kind of a two-part question. Number one, how important is knowledge? And then what are the other things that you see that are common amongst the guys who make it and go big and end up creating the life that they've set out to accomplish for themselves?
So there's one form of knowledge that I think is more important than any other form, and that's knowledge of people. I think what highly successful people do more intentionally and more deliberately than most is they understand who to go to for what. They don't necessarily have all the answers. They don't necessarily need all the answers, but they know who will have the right answer. And then they know how to understand people. So, if I need to learn about, renting a house out by the bedroom, I could read on Google, or I could say, who in my world do I know about this? And then I can reach out to you and say, hey, how can I help you? What's going on? How can I be of service? And then I can start to like learn and grow as a human, as a way of serving you. And then that's how I acquire my knowledge. So what I would tell you is I think like the number one form of knowledge from my perspective that everybody has the capabilities to harness is just knowledge of people. So just know who to go to, when to go to them, and why to go to them. And then if you want to go another level deeper, understand what their love language is. Like if you really want to get to know people, like I can give you an example. One of the people on our team, her love language is words of affirmation. So if I want her to run through a brick wall for me and I'm on a Zoom call and she's on it, and let's say we're on a tribe-wide Zoom call with 150 guys, I can be like, hey, so-and-so is an absolute rock star. She's absolutely incredible. Like, please make sure to just give her a thanks if you see her. And that's what she needs to keep her going. That's what she needs to keep herself ticking. So you pay attention to humans. And I think if you have knowledge of people, you can really, really achieve whatever level of success you desire.
Wow. So we've got service, knowledge matched with service is like a dynamic duo, right? Or,
I think so.
Who matched with service,
I think
knowing who to go to and match with service is a dynamic duo. But what would you say are some of the other denominators that you've seen as you've watched this group evolve and come up through the ranks? I think one of them is you have to have a vision for your life. David preached that to me at a very young age. Like, you have to have a vision for what you're trying to do with your life,
not what the news wants you to do with your life, not what Facebook wants you to do with your life, not what Target wants you to do with your life, but like you, Sam, what are you going to do with your life? And I think you'll find that the higher you go on the success ladder, look at it in sports, right? Like Michael Jordan was crystal clear as to who he was and what he was going to accomplish in basketball. Tiger Woods was crystal clear as to who he was and what he was going to accomplish in golf. So if you have a clear vision, I think you just are able to navigate life and anything that gets thrown at you and understand, like, how does this serve me or how does this help me? And then the last thing I would say is I think successful people are very intentional with their time. Time is like the number one thing we can't make more of, we can't buy more of, we can't get more of. And so, if you look at Kobe Bryant, for instance, why did Kobe Bryant fly in a helicopter to practice? Because it allowed him to not have to sit in traffic, but it allowed him to spend more time with his family, allowed him to get to practice earlier, allowed him to get home earlier, allowed him to stay later. Like, it gave him flexibilities and freedoms that made him more efficient with his time, which allowed him to do more in a day than you or I could maybe do because we sat in traffic in LA.
Yeah, man, I think about that often. One of the things I've recently done is I drive a Tesla, and there's this way you can, I probably shouldn't be saying this on a recording call, but if you put a weight on the steering wheel, you can like trick the sensor, and the sensor will think that your hands are on the wheel all the time. So I've done this to my car, and it's actually very popular. Like, it's actually very common, like on the Tesla threads, to have a weight on your, and just to see the amount of time, and I trust it a lot. So just to see the amount of time that I got back and how much I'm able to have my car be a mobile office is really, really, really fascinating. But they've since the last update, they've since outsmarted the weights, so that's not really possible to do anymore, which is really cool. And I'm not updating my car. I've only updated my wife's car. But man, what about failure? You've watched some guys come in, and I think one of the things I really respect about Napoleon Hill was his ability to say, hey, look, here's what I see the common denominators of success are, and here's some ways that you can go wrong. Here's some ways that if you get too caught up in this or this, it ends badly. It ends poorly for you. I know you've seen that. I know you and I have watched guys come in and that happen. What would you say are some things to watch out for? Some warning signs from Matt King.
I mean, look, Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy, is absolute gold. If you haven't read it, by all means, like, pick it up on Amazon now and read it. I think ego is the number one thing that, sort of can start to get you off the rails. And then also, I think not having a clear why. So if you don't have a clear why and your why just becomes money, it's very hard to make ethical, good choices because you're just letting like a dollar sort of steer you, and it will take you to terrible places. I mean, it can take you to great places too, but if money's your only thing, it can be very dangerous. And then the last thing I would say is, I think so many of us surround ourselves with friends, and friends tell us what we want to hear. But we need to surround ourselves with allies, and allies tell us what we need to hear. And so you have to kind of find allies in your life, people that aren't like, hey, I care about, Sam as a friend, but hey, I care about Sam as a human, and I'm not afraid to call him out. And you need to surround yourself with people like, and trust that can be allies for you. Because at the end of the day, again, we're all human. Like, we all live in this echo chamber of our own BS, and it sounds great in our heads. Trust me, it sounds really good. But you need somebody that's not afraid to check in and go, you really believe that? You sure? Like, hey, let me pause you there. Let's have a conversation about that. And so, I think finding allies, which is one of the things I think GoBundance does so well for so many of our members, is it creates that board of directors for your lives that aren't friends, but are allies that tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear.
Yeah, one of GoBundance's pillars is this extreme accountability. Would you mind sharing kind of how GoBundance sets that up and creates an environment where that is the case? And I was on a call the other day, and I had a couple of people telling me what I feel like I wanted to hear, and it made me feel really good. And then one guy, kind of more abruptly said, are you looking for advice or are you looking for permission? And it was just like this weird question that was kind of challenging me. And I remember like feeling like I was like pissed at him for like a good 3 seconds, right? I was just like, what kind of question is that, dude? And then I realized like, okay, that's exactly what I needed to hear in this moment, because I was out there asking for advice when really I just wanted someone to say, go do that, just give me that permission. How does GoBundance do that, and how does it set it up?
Yeah, so I think like the way that GoBundance has done it in such a great manner is like they we've done a good job of creating sort of like an authentic, vulnerable conversation that occurs around people's one sheets. And the one sheet is like a baseball card for your life. It's a tool or a technology that GoBundance has developed and uses. And really what it is like, get all your life on one piece of paper, your finances, your health, your goals, your relationship, what you need help with, what you want to be held accountable for. And then look another human being in the eyes and tell them what's on that piece of paper. And I think when you do that, you kind of break down these barriers of like, societal norms of like, don't talk about money or don't talk about relationship or don't say you had a bad day. And then also like you break down like the ego and you go like, this is me, like in essence, standing naked. And like, here I am with all my faults and all my greatness. And, this is who I am. And then people can pour into you and help you. And it's not from an attacking place, but rather like a curious place of like, who do you want to become? How are you going to get there? How can we help you? How can we support you? And, I think having tools that help facilitate conversation is the trick to creating more accountability, because at the end of the day, in society, we aren't really challenged consistently to ask questions. It's more like just take an answer and move on. And I think, one of the greatest things we can do as humans is ask why 3 times. So it's like, if I heard you saying that on a call the other day, I'd say why. And then you tell me, well, because I think that's right for my business. And I'd say why. And you're like, well, because I think that's going to drive the KPIs to do what I need to do. And I'd be like, well, why? And if you can go like 3 levels deep on the why, like you probably have a pretty good compass. You probably have a pretty good sense of why you're doing it. But most of us can't get past level 1, let alone level 2.
Yeah, man, that's beautifully said. And I think it's one of the things that I've learned to appreciate about GoBundance so much is the accountability. And like you said, the vulnerability that people get to open up, get to share, and you feel safe. Like ultimately at the end of the day, I feel like guys have to feel safe to stand there naked and share. Like,
big time.
This is what I made last year. This is how much I paid in taxes last year. And this is my net worth. I mean, this is like a lot of things that guys put our self-worth in sometimes.
Yeah. And like the question is like, why? Like, at the end of the day, if I made $1 and you made 2, like who cares? That doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make me a worse person. Like there's so much judgment and shame in the world we live in today. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, David says this all the time, like we come from dust and we return to dust. Like none of it matters. Like your net worth, if that's your scoreboard, cool. Like that's fun. Chase it, go pay attention to it. But don't sacrifice your family for it. Don't sacrifice your health for it. Don't sacrifice your community for it. And I think if you have a group like GoBundance that helps hold you accountable to not do those things, now all of a sudden, like the net worth just becomes a byproduct of serving all those other things in your life. Yeah. Like, well, that was way easier, right? It's no different than if you're trying to lose weight. If you focus only on the number on the scale, it's a miserable journey. But if all of a sudden you focus on the diet and the habits and the consistency around your workouts, you step on the scale one day and go, wow, that was really easy. Like that wasn't hard. So I think it's just all about having the right people in your corner.
On a similar vein, I was on a call with you not too long ago, and you shared a quote that I wrote down. And it's kind of stuck with me since. That you said, "Don't ever love something that can't love you back." Would you share what that? It's on this vein of where we're putting our time, where we're putting our energy. Would you share what that means to you and how you came to know that quote?
So my parents had above their bed at now I can say their old house in Wisconsin because they just retired and moved down to Texas. But they had above their bed for the longest time was when I was a kid. And it said, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it was meant to be. If it doesn't, it never was. And I was like, what does that mean? And I've like processed it and thought about it. And like, at the end of the day, one of the things David's preached to me is like, live a life unhooked. Like, don't get so attached to the Packers game and worrying about how good Aaron Rodgers is. Cause until he calls you on his birthday, like, don't let that ruin your day. Like you have no control over it. Right. And so then when I tied that into the quote that's kind of resonated with me from my parents for a long time, it was kind of like, well, I only have so much of me to give. And who am I to give it to something that won't love me back? Right. And how dare I deplete that love that I could give to my children or my wife to something like the Packers that, again, won't love me back. Right. And so I think you just have to recognize like where your energy is going. Then you have to ask yourself, like, what is this doing for me? Right. And how do I feel about it? And, it's not from judgment. Like, I still love watching the Packers. I still get mad as heck when I watch them lose like they are this year. But after the game, I kind of move on. It's like, okay, cool. My life moves on. here we go. Like now I'm going to go focus on my kids, or I'm going to go focus on me. So I think it's just about paying attention to where your energy is going, because you only have so much.
It's beautiful. I'd like to switch gears and just kind of get your thoughts on one more subject if I could. And that's like a specific, a lot of the reason I started this podcast was because I'm all in on a strategy right now for real estate investing. That's called co-living. It's kind of the new up and coming term where people are using, but basically it's room renting. It was called house hacking for a while when people would live in the one room and rent out all the rest. And I just, as an asset class, I really want to get your honest, no BS. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this before this thing on co-living. Maybe what you see is great about it. I know I've shared with you some about what I'm doing, and maybe what you see some of the warning signs would be for someone that's interested in investing in co-living, or some of the challenges or some of the negatives of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question, man. I mean, from an asset class, it's definitely emerging. And I think it will continue to emerge as other asset classes are overcrowded, say self-storage or multifamily, et cetera. There's this statement that says there's riches in the niches. And I think co-living is a niche where there's a lot of riches. My only warning to people would be like, if you're going to invest in the space, make sure you do it with proven good people that understand the operational efficiencies of it and really have their systems dialed in. Like, it's just like single family rentals. It sounds so easy when you listen to some talking head like myself on a podcast go like, yeah, you just make an offer and you get a loan and then you have it. But it's like, well, what happens when like they have a tenant issue, and how do they manage delinquencies? And then how do they screen their tenants? And then how do they set up the house for maximum flexibility and usability? And like, how are they buying it? What's the exit cap? So you really want to just get in with people in the space that are experts. So I think people leaning on someone like you who is, eating, sleeping, breathing it, is the right move. Someone like you who's tested it with your own money for many, many, many years and refined the model, probably made a bunch of mistakes, probably failed, got back up, changed it, tweaked it, etc. But I think it's going to continue to be an emerging asset class, especially as it just gets harder and harder for people to find places to park capital with high returns or good yields. And I think people are going to find unique ways like co-living to deploy capital and generate really cool returns.
Is part of the reason you think it's going to be a great asset class is because of just, and this was actually my final thing I kind of wanted to touch on with you, is because of where you see the economy going in the next, say, 1 to 5 years? Or are you just saying in general, no, like it's just overcrowded asset classes create opportunities for what we call like blue oceans, like open space and other places? Yeah,
I mean, I would say like the reason I think it's going to be an emerging asset class is twofold. One is definitely the economy. I think we're going to see some tougher times. I think we're already seeing it. The cost of living has not gotten cheaper. The cost of a gallon of milk is not cheap. I live in Austin, Texas. This is not a cheap place to live. So I think you're seeing the cost of living going up. But the other reason I think you'll see more of it is I think you see people wanting more flexibility in their lives. And what I mean by that is like work from home. COVID made that a thing, right? Work remotely. That made front headlines through COVID, is like people were traveling and going and working in these remote destinations. And so I think what you're going to see is more people that want to not necessarily be tied down by things. And the way to avoid being tied down is to decrease your overhead, decrease your footprint. And when you leave, just lock your bedroom door and go, okay, I can still pay that $300 or $500 a month, whatever it is. And my bed's safe and I'm good, but I'm going to go work from, some ocean somewhere, some beach somewhere or something. And then, you can kind of just have more flexibility in your life because you have less overhead.
Yeah. I feel like our generation we want to put more money into experiences. The American dream of like, let me buy a big house and let me have it. I mean, that might, we've realized we can rent that and like have a party for a week and call it a day. And then like,
not have the overhead of it, right? Or the headaches of it. And I just think the other thing you're seeing more now than ever, Sam, is like people are feeling lonely. And I think social media has created that. I think COVID created that. I think our sort of cell phone usage has created that. Like I'm guiltier than anybody, but how many times do you pick up the phone to call someone now? You just shoot them a text and go like, here's what I need from you. Give it to me. And so I think like this co-living thing scratches an itch of community where people like kind of go back to the college dorm scene where it's like, I got some friends. I'm not alone. I'm not just like sitting in my 1-bedroom apartment by myself watching people critique me on Facebook. And so I think there's like a deep rooted community thing that it scratches too. That's really interesting for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. When my wife, I tell this story all the time, but when my wife met me, I had 6 roommates, and I tell her regularly, I'm like, I would still be living with 6 roommates if you hadn't told me that like it was never going to fly. Yeah, exactly. So that's awesome, man. You said tougher times. And so my final question for you is, I'm teaching these courses now, these 5-day challenges, and we get a couple hundred people on every time. And, I'm just asking everybody, like, what do you guys think? Are you guys think the economy is going to get better from here on out? Or do you think the economy is going to get worse before it gets better? And it is arguably 100% of people are like, it is going to get worse before it gets out. And I've never seen that kind of like pessimism before about like, nope, we all like pretty on point with it being worse. I'm curious what your take is on that. And you have access to so many resources and so many people, as you taught us in this episode. And so I'm curious, as you aggregate all of that data, and I know you don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But what are you seeing? What do you, and what are your thoughts about where it goes from here?
Things go up, then they go down. It's a matter of how bad it's going to be. And I think, my sense of it is it's going to be worse than people expect, because that's just normally how things go. Like we always go, oh, I didn't think it'd be that bad. Now you have like a bunch of wild cards in at this time. Like if you look at the amount of institutions inside of the single family residential space today versus 2007, there's a much different sort of home ownership group in the United States. It's these large institutional players. And so, I don't know that we'll see a necessary crash in real estate specifically. But I certainly know the actions of our government, the actions of the Fed, and, printing all that money and doing what we did through COVID, like it can't just go away. Like our debt load doesn't just go away overnight. And so, I think at some point we're going to have a reckoning. The $1 million question is when, and then how bad. And my take is we also now have this other wild card, which the government got really comfortable with printing money, and we're about to hit an election year. So like all cards are off the table. I have no idea what's going to happen. But I've been telling everybody, like, look, if you have 100% decision-making ability, and your full decision is 100%, I would say that, there's probably about a 2% chance that the market increases by 20% over the next 90 days. I'd say there's probably like a 48% chance that the market remains flat over the next 90 days. And I'd say there's about a 50% chance that the market corrects by more than 10% and goes down in the next 90 days. So if you have a 90% likelihood that the market is flat or down in 90 days, right, what a great time to be acquiring knowledge, listening to people talking, pay attention to things, buttoning down your hatches, getting your finances in order, getting your house in order. So when you do have that data, you do have that information, you can make a more educated, calculated decision and hopefully have the odds stacked in your favor, not against you.
Right. Let's say it is going to be worse than people expect.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for someone who wants to prepare and be prepared for, say, a worst case scenario or a worser case scenario, if not the doomsday scenario? Not the Robert Kiyosaki scenario, but
I'm not the doomsday prepper. Like I got a guy who I know who's sending me pictures of like armored vehicles with like oxygen masks. I'm like, dude, if it gets that far, do you really want to be trying to save yourself? Like, just give up, like move on, like it's done. But what I would tell people is from like a financial perspective is like, know your numbers. So Tim Rode preaches this all the time. A minus B equals C. So what are you bringing in? What are you spending? And what do you have left to invest? And make a commitment to understanding your numbers. There's so many people I talk to on a daily basis where I'm like, what are your annual expenses? They're like, well, I don't know. It's like 50. I'm like, well, is it like 50 or is it 50? Like, I don't know. I've never calculated it. Like, well, okay, go calculate it. And they come back and go, well, it's 75. I'm like, dude, that's a lot. That's 50% more than you thought. Like, that's a lot of money. And so I think you got to get really clear on your finances, get really clear on your numbers. And then the other thing you have to do is have a vision for your life. Like David preached to me, like I preach to so many people, like have a vision for your life. So get your finances in order, Understand what you're bringing in, understand what you're spending, and understand what you have left, and build that C as big as you can. And then have a vision for your life. Like, what do you want to be doing with your time? What do you want to be remembered for? What's your legacy? And when you have clarity around that, it will be much easier to make decisions when their opportunity does present itself, rather than saying, well, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. Like, I'm not really sure. Maybe I'll flip a house. Maybe I'll try co-living. Maybe I'll just invest in Sam's thing, right? So you have to have a vision for your life to help you navigate whatever opportunities show up.
Wow. Beautiful, man. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time today, man. If someone wants to get in touch with your team or is interested in GoBundance, what's the best way for them to follow you or connect with you or your team? And
like I'm on all the social media platforms. I can't ever remember the handles or usernames or whatever, so we'll just have your team shared in the notes. You can go to GoBundance.com, learn more about GoBundance. You can email me at matt@GoBundance.com. It's just 2 T's at GoBundance.com, METT. And the only thing I would encourage everybody listening to this today is like pause and find somebody to learn from, whether it's the janitor or the custodian or the pilot or the ticketer, it doesn't matter. Like, just pause and see what you can learn from somebody, and then watch how much they light up by giving you that knowledge. It's a pretty powerful little gift you can give to somebody, and also that you can receive. Dude, I appreciate you. I'm going to let you get back to your life. Thank you for your commitment to service, man. Thank you for your commitment to serve me. Thank you for your commitment to serve GoBundance, all the guys in this group. I really appreciate you. And if there's ever anything I can do to serve you more, please let me know. You're already doing it, man. Hey, your business partner joined GoBundance. Yeah, I know. He's so excited. I'm so excited. He came up to me. He's like, oh, I'm Sam's business partner. I'm like, oh, cool. He's like, you're the one that you've been giving Sam all those strategies to negotiate with me. I'm like, oh, cool. He's like, can I learn from you too? I'm like, no, not really. He's an awesome guy, funny. Man. He told me that. He's super cool. Good. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. That's great. So, all right, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. I took a lot of notes on ways that these things can improve my life. I really liked how he said, service is the Trojan horse of knowledge. It's the secret way that you get knowledge is by serving, even in the smallest of ways. And I like he said, there's really one type of knowledge that you should be after, and that is the knowledge of people and those connections of who has the answers I need. I don't need to go get them all. I need to know somebody who has all the answers I need. And the way that you build that network authentically is through service. Grateful to have Matt on. If you like this episode, please share it with somebody that would benefit from it. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the very next episode.